By the end of this video, you will know exactly which 10 things to quietly remove from your life. No announcement, no confrontation, no dramatic exit, just a quiet subtraction that changes everything downstream of it. Picture this. A man sits at a dinner table, smiling, nodding, agreeing with someone he privately disagrees with, and he will go home tonight replaying it, wondering why he feels so tired despite doing nothing physical all day. That tiredness has a name, and it isn't burnout. And later I'll show you why the obvious way people try to fix this, by removing people, by removing noise, by removing obligations, actually backfires for most of them, and what you need to remove instead. If any of this sounds familiar already, type quiet in the comments right now before you forget. You know the feeling. You wake up already behind, the phone is in your hand before your feet touch the floor, and within 90 seconds you've absorbed 40 pieces of information that have nothing to do with your actual life, someone's vacation, someone's outrage, someone's staged authenticity. You get to work, or you open your laptop at the kitchen table, and the first hour disappears into other people's demands on your attention. A message that needs a careful, diplomatic answer, a meeting that could have been an email, a coworker who needs to vent for 15 minutes about something you can't fix. By lunch, you've made dozens of small decisions, and almost none of them were about what you actually wanted. This is not laziness, this is not a discipline problem. This is a slow, silent leak, attention flowing out of you in 100 small directions before you've spent a single unit of it on your own life. Think about the last time you scrolled past someone's life and felt that small, sour twist in your stomach, not envy exactly, something quieter and more corrosive. Think about the last argument you replayed in the shower 3 days after it happened, rehearsing the comeback you never said. Think about the plans you agreed to because saying no felt heavier than just going. None of these cost you money. All of them cost you something more expensive: time you cannot buy back, and a kind of internal quiet you cannot manufacture once it's gone. This is the real price of an unexamined life. Not catastrophe, just erosion. A little bit of you, gone, every single day, spent on things you never chose. Marcus Aurelius, a man who ran an empire while writing notes to himself that he never intended anyone else to read, kept returning to one idea. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. He wasn't talking about controlling the world. He was talking about something much smaller and much harder: noticing where your attention goes, and understanding that most of what disturbs you isn't the event itself, but the story you immediately attach to it. He wrote that as if it were obvious. It is not obvious. Most of us live as if the opposite were true, as if our peace depended entirely on other people behaving correctly, on the world cooperating, on nothing going wrong. Today, we're going to build the opposite habit. Here is the core idea, and it is simpler than you expect. Growth, in the second half of your life especially, is rarely about what you add. It's about what you finally, quietly, permanently take away. Not a purge, not a dramatic reset where you delete every app and move to a cabin. Just a series of small, deliberate subtractions, removing specific things that are currently costing you more than they're giving you, without asking anyone's permission and without making it anyone else's business. Let's be precise about what this does not mean, because this is the part people get wrong immediately. This is not about becoming cold, detached, or indifferent to the people in your life. Stoicism has a branding problem. People here control your emotions and imagine a man in a toga refusing to feel anything. That is not what this is. You can love people fiercely and still remove your dependency on their approval. You can care deeply about outcomes and still remove your attachment to controlling them. Subtraction is not the same as numbness, it is the opposite. Actually, it's how you make room to feel the things that matter, instead of drowning them out with things that don't. And notice how this cuts against everything you're rewarded for. The culture around you rewards addition. More followers, more commitments, more visible busyness, more opinions defended loudly, more relationships maintained, regardless of what they cost you. Nobody claps when you quietly stop doing something. There's no applause for a boundary nobody sees you set. But that's exactly why it works, because it's not performed for anyone. It's not a personal brand, it's just your actual life, getting quieter and more yours, one removal at a time. The first thing to remove is the habit of explaining yourself to people who didn't ask for a reason. Picture this. Your coworker asks why you left the group chat, And before you've even thought about it, 3 sentences of justification are already out of your mouth. You were busy, you didn't mean anything by it, you'll rejoin soon. You didn't decide to say that. It just came out, the way a reflex fires before the thought behind it catches up. Notice how much of your day is built from these tiny automatic justifications for declining an invitation, for eating what you eat, for how you spend a Saturday, for a decision that affects nobody but you. Epictetus, who spent years as a slave before becoming one of the most influential teachers of his era, built his entire philosophy around one distinction. Some things are within your power and some things are not, and misery comes from confusing the two. Your reasons for your own choices are entirely within your power. Whether someone accepts those reasons is not. The moment you start over-explaining, you've quietly handed your decision over to a jury that never asked to be convened. There's a name for part of what's happening here. Social psychologists call it the spotlight effect. The well-documented tendency to wildly overestimate how much other people notice and judge our choices. You imagine an audience scrutinizing your every move, and you perform your justifications for that audience, except the audience is almost entirely imaginary. Most people are too busy running the same anxious commentary about themselves to spend real time auditing your Saturday. Here's the reframe. Over-explaining isn't politeness. It's a subtle admission that you don't fully believe you're allowed to make the choice in the first place. And once you see it that way, it stops feeling considerate and starts feeling like a leak. Starting today, try this. The next time you catch yourself justifying a small personal decision, cut the explanation down to 1 sentence and then physically stop talking, even if it feels uncomfortable. I can't make it is a complete sentence. Notice how rarely anyone actually pushes back. Notice how much of the pressure you felt was never coming from them at all. The second thing to remove is your availability to people who only appear when they need something. You know the pattern. The message comes in at 11 p.m. and it's not, how are you? It's a problem, a favor, a vent session that ends the moment they feel better, with no follow-up question about how you're doing. Weeks go by in silence, then the moment there's a crisis, you're first on the list. And you answer every time. Because not answering feels like abandoning someone, even though the relationship has quietly become a one-way transfer of your energy into their relief. Seneca wrote to a friend about the true scarcity in life, not time itself, which we actually have plenty of, but the fact that so much of it is stolen, wasted, or given away carelessly to people and pursuits that don't deserve it. He wasn't talking about being generous with your time. He was talking about being awake enough to notice when your time is being taken rather than given. There's a psychological pattern worth naming here, the Ben Franklin effect, where doing favors for someone actually increases our liking for them, which sounds sweet, until you realize it also explains why we keep showing up for people who never reciprocate. Every time you rescue them, your brain quietly rationalizes the relationship as worth it, even as the evidence stacks up that it isn't. You're not staying because the relationship is good. You're staying because you've done too much for it to admit that it isn't. Here's the counterintuitive part, pay attention, because this is where most people flinch. You are allowed to keep loving someone and still stop being their emergency contact for problems they created themselves. Those two things are not in conflict. Compassion doesn't require you to be infinitely available. Notice that. Sit with it for a second, because it probably doesn't feel true yet. Reframe it like this. Your energy is not an infinite public utility. It is a finite resource you are responsible for allocating, and every yes to someone who takes without giving is a no to something or someone that actually deserve it. Today, pick one person in this pattern, and the next time they reach out only in crisis, wait an hour before responding instead of dropping everything. Watch what that small delay reveals about the relationship. The third thing to remove is the habit of comparing your unfinished life to everyone else's highlight reel. You open the app during a quiet moment, waiting for coffee, lying in bed, and within seconds, you've seen someone's promotion, someone's engagement, someone's beach vacation, someone's perfectly organized home, and something in your chest tightens just slightly in a way you'd never admit out loud. You tell yourself you're happy for them. Part of you is. But another part is running a silent audit of your own life against theirs, and your life is losing because you're comparing your behind the scenes to their highlight reel. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself constantly that he could only ever live the life directly in front of him, not someone else's, not an imagined life, only this one, right now, in these exact circumstances. He wrote this while ruling most of the known world, which tells you something. Even total external success doesn't cure the comparison instinct. It has to be dealt with directly, or it will find something new to attach itself to no matter how much you achieve. This is social comparison theory in its purest form, the well-established idea that we determine our own worth largely by measuring ourselves against others, especially in the absence of objective standards. The problem isn't that comparison exists, it's built into how humans evaluate themselves. The problem is that you're comparing yourself to a curated sample size of one moment, chosen specifically because it looks good, against your entire messy, ongoing, unedited life. Ask yourself honestly, when was the last time a comparison like this actually improved your day, rather than just souring it? Rarely, if ever. That's worth sitting with. Here's the reframe. What you're seeing was never the full picture, and what you feel when you see it was never really about them. It's about an unmet expectation you're holding against your own timeline. The action today is simple and almost too small to feel significant. Mute for 30 days without unfollowing or announcing it the 3 accounts that reliably produce that tight feeling in your chest, not out of anger, just subtraction. See how much quieter that specific noise gets. The 4th thing to remove is the grudge you keep alive by replaying it. You know the scene, the argument from 2 years ago, the thing your sibling said at that dinner, the way a former friend cut you off without explanation? You're not in that room anymore. But some nights, in the shower, in the car, right before sleep, you're back there running the scene again, this time with better comebacks, sharper arguments, the version of you that wins. Here's the part that stings. They've probably forgotten. You're the only one still paying rent on that memory. Marcus Aurelius put it with brutal simplicity. How much time he saved himself by not looking at what his neighbor said, did or thought, and instead only at what he himself was doing. He wasn't saying other people's wrongs don't matter. He was saying that replaying them doesn't correct them, it just extends the damage indefinitely. Self-inflicted long after the original event ended. Psychologists describe this as rumination, the repetitive, passive dwelling on distress that, unlike active problem solving, doesn't lead anywhere new. It just deepens the groove. Your brain mistakes the repetition for processing. It is not processing. It's a loop with no exit built into it. Here's a pattern interrupt worth pausing on. What if the resentment isn't protecting you from getting hurt again? What if it's actually the last thread still tying you to a version of the story where you never have to move forward? That's uncomfortable to consider. Sit with it anyway. The reframe is this. Forgiveness, in the Stoic sense, isn't a gift you're handing the other person. It's you finally closing an account that's been quietly draining you for years for their benefit or without their even knowing it exists. Today's action, write down the grudge in one sentence on paper and then write underneath it. This cost me more than it cost them. Read it once, then put it away, not to forget it, but to stop paying it daily interest. The 5th thing to remove is the performance of being busy. You've built a life where, how are you, gets answered with so busy, honestly, delivered almost proudly, like exhaustion is proof of importance. Your calendar is full, your inbox is full. You measure your worth, quietly, by how depleted you are by 6 p.m., as if tiredness were the receipt that proves you matter today. But look closer at what's actually filling those hours. A meeting that could have been 3 sentences, a group chat that needed managing, a dozen small tasks that exist mostly to be visible, not to actually move anything forward. Seneca had a sharp line for this, that people are frugal with their money but reckless with the one thing that's actually irreplaceable, guarding their property fiercely while handing out their days to anyone who asks. Busyness for many people isn't a symptom of a full life. It's a symptom of an unexamined one activity substituting for direction, because direction requires decisions, and decisions require admitting you might choose wrong. There's a concept called the sunk cost fallacy that applies eerily well here, the tendency to keep pouring time into commitments simply because you've already invested time in them, regardless of whether they're still worth it. You keep attending the thing, keep saying yes to the recurring obligation, not because it serves you now, but because stopping would mean admitting the last 2 years of doing it were at least partly wasted motion. Here's the reframe. Being busy was never proof you were living well. It was often proof you hadn't yet decided what actually mattered, so you filled the space with everything, to avoid the discomfort of filling it with something specific and risking that it isn't enough. Today, go through your calendar for the coming week and find one recurring commitment that exists purely out of habit. Cancel it. Just one. Notice what surfaces in the silence it leaves behind. If you've made it this far, you already think differently than most people watching a video like this. Most people click away long before the ideas get specific, and you didn't. So do one small thing right now. Hit like on this video, not for me, but because it's the fastest way to signal to your own feed that you want more of this kind of thinking and less of the noise we just talked about removing. And remember that open loop from the very beginning, the one about why removing things the obvious way backfires for most people. We're about to get there. Keep going. The sixth thing to remove is the relationship you're maintaining purely out of guilt. Every family has one. The cousin you see once a year because we're family and the entire visit feels like a performance neither of you enjoys. The old friend from a decade ago whose birthday message you feel obligated to send, dreading the reply because the relationship stopped being about connection and became about not being the one who let it die. You tell yourself you're being loyal. What you're actually doing is paying an emotional debt to a version of the relationship that no longer exists, to avoid the discomfort of admitting it's over. Epictetus taught that you should examine every relationship and role you carry, honestly, and ask whether it still fits who you actually are, not who you were when you first took it on. He wasn't advocating cruelty. He was advocating honesty, which is rarer and harder and which most people avoid because honesty about a relationship's expiration date feels like an act of aggression, even when it's really just an act of clarity. This connects to something psychologists call cognitive dissonance, the discomfort of holding two conflicting beliefs at once. In this case, I don't actually enjoy this relationship and I am a loyal, good person who maintains relationships. Rather than resolve the tension by changing the relationship, most people resolve it by changing the story, convincing themselves they do value it, to avoid confronting the mismatch. That's exhausting to sustain indefinitely, and it rarely holds. Here's the reframe. Letting a guilt-based relationship fade isn't betrayal. Betrayal is pretending to someone that you value them at a level you don't for years because ending the pretense feels ruder than continuing the lie. Today's action isn't dramatic. You don't need to send a farewell message or force a confrontation. Simply stop initiating. Just once. Let the relationship reveal honestly whether it was ever mutual to begin with. The seventh thing to remove is the old version of yourself that other people still expect you to perform. This one is quieter and more uncomfortable than the others because it's not about a bad habit, it's about an identity. Maybe you used to be the funny one, the reliable one, the one who never says no, the one who always has it together. And even after you've changed, even after you've grown past that role, you kept yourself still performing it in front of the people who knew you when, because disappointing their expectation of you feels like a small betrayal, even when the role no longer fits. Marcus Aurelius wrote about waking each day ready to meet people who are difficult, ungrateful, or unaware, and reminding himself that their perception of him was never his responsibility to manage or correct. That includes people who've simply frozen their idea of you at some earlier point and never updated it. Their outdated picture of you is not a debt you owe them. This is attachment theory brushing up against something adjacent, the discomfort of disrupting a relational pattern that's felt stable for a long time, even when the pattern no longer serves either person. Change, even good change, registers to the nervous system as a kind of threat to the relationship stability, which is why growing past an old role can feel more anxious than staying stuck in one that no longer fits. Here's the reframe. You don't owe anyone a static version of yourself, frozen at the age they last paid close attention. Growth that makes people uncomfortable is not a flaw in your growth. It's evidence that it's real. Today, notice one place where you're still performing an old role, the peacekeeper, the funny one, the one who never asks for help around a specific person, and let one crack show. Just one moment of not performing it. Watch what that reveals about whether the relationship can hold the actual you. The eighth thing to remove is the fear of disappointing people who are never fully satisfied to begin with. This is different from the others because it targets a very specific kind of relationship: the parent whose approval always seems just out of reach, the boss who moves the goalpost the moment you clear it, the mentor whose praise always comes with a but. You keep striving for a reaction you're never actually going to get, mistaking the chase itself for a sign that the approval must be close, must be earned eventually if you just do one more thing right. Epictetus made a distinction that cuts right through this. Your job is to act well according to your own judgment. The other person's reaction belongs entirely to them and was never yours to control or guarantee. Chasing an unreachable approval isn't devotion. It's a category error, applying effort to something that was never structured to respond to effort in the first place. Here's the psychological framing, and it's a heavy one worth sitting with. Some people are simply not structured, by temperament or history, to give the specific validation you're seeking, regardless of what you do, and no amount of achievement on your end changes their internal wiring on theirs. This isn't about giving up on people. It's about correctly identifying which outcomes are actually available to you and which never were, no matter how hard you try. Ask yourself honestly right now, if this person never changes, not one bit, what will you have spent your entire effort chasing? Let that question actually land before you move past it. The reframe. You can love someone, respect someone, even keep them in your life, while quietly retiring the specific project of earning their approval. Those are separable. Today's action. Name specifically one thing you've been doing primarily to earn a reaction from someone who reliably doesn't give it, and do it once this week purely for yourself instead, with no audience in mind at all. The ninth thing to remove is your attachment to being right in arguments that don't actually matter. You know this one intimately. The debate about a trivial fact, the correction nobody asked for, the need to have the last word even when the conversation has clearly run its course. Somewhere along the way, being right became tangled up with being respected, so every small disagreement started to feel like a referendum on your worth, instead of just a difference of opinion about something largely inconsequential. Marcus Aurelius asked himself a version of one question repeatedly. Is this the hill, truly, or is my ego simply dressed up as principle right now? He understood that most disputes people cling to aren't really about the facts at all, they're about a bruised sense of self, using the argument as a stage. There's a well-documented pattern called the need for cognitive closure, a discomfort with ambiguity that pushes people to seek firm final answers, sometimes prematurely, just to resolve the internal tension of an unresolved disagreement. Winning the argument doesn't actually resolve that tension long term. It just quiets it until the next disagreement arrives and the cycle repeats, using up energy that never accumulates into anything. Here's the reframe, and it's sharper than it first sounds. Every time you let a pointless argument go unfinished, you're not losing. You're simply refusing to pay for something that was never actually worth the price. Being right about a trivial thing and being at peace are frequently mutually exclusive in the moment you get to choose, every time, which one you actually want more. Today, the next time you feel the pull to correct someone about something that changes nothing, let it pass out loud and say instead, you might be right, even if you're not fully convinced. Watch how little that costs you and how much room it frees up. And now here is the paradox, the thing all 9 of these have quietly been circling without naming directly. You've spent this entire video removing things that cost you peace, explaining yourself. One-sided relationships, comparison, grudges, busyness, guilt, outdated roles, unearned approval, pointless arguments. 9 subtractions. But here's why most people who try this fail anyway. And here's the open loop finally closing. They remove all of that and then, quietly, they replace it with the 10th thing, the one underneath all the others, the one none of the first 9 can fully work without addressing the need to be understood. This is the hardest one because it doesn't look like a flaw, it looks like connection. It feels noble to want people to truly see you, to finally get why you did what you did, to recognize the good intentions behind the imperfect execution. But notice something uncomfortable. Almost every one of the first 9 things quietly reappears the moment you cling to this 10th one. You'll over-explain again, not because you forgot, but because you desperately want this specific person to understand. You'll chase the unreachable approval again, not for the approval itself, but because being understood by that particular person feels like it would finally validate everything. The need to be understood is the root system underneath every other weed we just pulled, and it's the one that grows back fastest if you don't remove it too. Seneca observed something quietly devastating about this, that most people would rather be misunderstood while comfortable than understood while it costs them something, which is precisely why they never actually pursue understanding, only the appearance of being agreeable enough to avoid conflict. The paradox is this: the moment you stop needing to be understood, genuinely stop, not perform not caring, while secretly still needing it, is the exact moment people finally start understanding you, because you're no longer twisting yourself into a shape designed to be legible to them. Explanation. Chased anxiously obscures. Explanation, offered freely with no attachment to the outcome, clarifies. The letting go isn't the opposite of connection, it's the precondition for it. This is the sharpest point in the entire video, so sit with it. You do not need everyone, or even most people, to fully grasp your reasoning, your choices, your inner life, in order for your life to be valid. That sentence should feel like it's rearranging something in your chest right now, because it's rearranging the load-bearing wall underneath everything else we've discussed. Picture the version of you 6 months from now, after these 10 things are actually gone, not performed as removed, but genuinely absent. You wake up and the first hour of your day is yours, not spent managing anyone's perception of you. You answer messages when you choose to, not out of reflexive guilt. You scroll occasionally and feel almost nothing, because the comparison muscle has quietly atrophied from disuse. Old arguments don't visit you in the shower anymore. They've simply gone silent, run out of oxygen. You say no to things, cleanly, without a paragraph of justification trailing behind it. Your calendar has space in it again, real space, not blocked off busyness dressed up as importance. You see the guilt relationship for what it actually is, and you feel lighter, not guiltier, for finally being honest about it. You catch yourself starting to perform an old role and, mid-sentence, you simply stop, and nobody's world ends. You notice the unreachable approval, name it quietly, and redirect that same effort towards something that actually answers back. You let the small argument go and feel nothing but relief where irritation used to live. None of this requires the world to get easier. People are still going to misunderstand you sometimes. Someone will still take something the wrong way. A relationship will still occasionally sting. Life doesn't get frictionless. That was never the promise. And it was never true for Marcus Aurelius running an empire, or Seneca advising a volatile emperor, or Epictetus building a philosophy from a life that started in chains. What changes isn't the weather around you. What changes is that you're no longer bracing against every gust of it, because you finally stopped handing your peace over to things that were never yours to control in the first place. Here's your challenge, and it's specific and it's time-bound. For the next 7 days, remove exactly one thing from this list. Pick the one that made your stomach tighten the most while you were listening, because that reaction is information, not coincidence. Not all 10. 1. Quietly, no announcement, no dramatic post about your growth journey, no explanation to anyone about what you're doing or why. Just remove it and watch what happens in the silence it leaves behind. If you had to boil this entire video down to one line, let it be this: you don't build a better life by adding more to it. You build it by finally noticing what's been quietly costing you and choosing, without apology, to stop paying. So here's the one thing I actually want from you before you go. Comment the word remove below right now, along with the single item from this list that you're starting with, not for me, but because writing it down publicly in one word is the first quiet, deliberate subtraction of the next 7 days. And it's genuinely the fastest way to make sure you follow through instead of just nodding along. If this reframed something for you, subscribe, because we build ideas like this one every single week. Thank you for staying to the end. That alone says something about you. Remove quietly, live loudly.